Hello everyone, it's time for another live look at the astrology. My name is Katie Sweetman and this is your look at the astrology of June 2nd through 8th, 2025. So yeah, we are in June. Like, how is that even possible? Time is flying. So how are you feeling? And for those that are watching live, as always, even if you're not watching live, it's always good to say hello to see where everybody's watching from. And for those that don't know who I am, my name is Katie Sweetman. I'm an astrologer and I'm a psychic medium located here in the rolling hills of Central Maryland. And every week we gather live to look at the astrology. You hear me say it every week. The astrology is 50%. You are the other 50%. So as I was probably talking about last week, Gemini season gives us a time to find our curiosity, to explore, to see new things, to get new points of view. And Gemini season with the Gemini new moon that we had last week on the 26th gives us a frame and a setting for the next now 3 weeks. So as we start the month, we are within this frame of time that really is through a Gemini lens. Now, Gemini might mean something different to you. It could be your sun sign. Happy birthday. It could be career. It could be relationships. It could be something else. Maybe you're born in the mid-1960s and you're picking up the energies of Uranus and Pluto in Virgo. So this is a time when sort of intense energies can come up, but I'm just using that as an examples. And one of the reasons I say astrology is 50%, you're the other 50%, is that through my work, I look at time and the energy of time, but we still have a spirit. We still are on a journey. And I wanted to add this because there's somebody that lately has been putting out my Facebook comments like astrology debunked in one word, twins. And normally I wouldn't comment on this sort of thing, but I just think it's super meta that this person is doing this during Gemini season, the sign of the twins. But that's a perfect example of astrology where there's the astrology and then there's the person, and that we make choices. We have free will to a degree. We are conscious, subconscious, and unconscious. So we work with the astrology as energy and archetypes to help reveal something deeper inside of us. Because we're not just a sun sign. That's usually where people are, when they take a swing at astrology, they take a swing at the sun sign. But we are all 12 signs. And I know you come here, you're like, just give me my horoscope, Katie. But we're going to learn a little bit because the zodiac is symbolic of, you've heard me say, the wheel of life and how it represents the totality of life here in this physical world. It's a stage and setting. I've already used that word. I used it to describe Gemini season, the Gemini new moon period. But the stage and setting of your life, may it be long. So we have the astrological year. It starts with Aries. It ends with Pisces. You have your own personal year. It starts with your birthday. It ends with the season right before your birthday season. And even your rising sign. It's another cycle. And so, these different points of view, it's just to remind you that we sort of take a little bit from each season. We learn a little bit more about ourselves through each of the 12 zodiac signs. It's energy. It's energy that we either live consciously or unconsciously. Gemini is the sign of voice and communication. You hopefully have a voice, but we all have a different relationship with that voice. And sometimes we don't use our voice, or the words that come out of our mouth are somebody else's voice. So this is a season to find our voice. It's also a season to find our relationship with the energy of choice. Gemini, twins, it's the energy of duality. Duality is what we see here in this physical plane. And so with Gemini, the first mutable sign, we see the fact that we can choose anything. As you probably know, if you're a little bit older, you realize that maybe choosing everything is not always the best choice. You get older, you get wiser, you make better choices, hopefully. At least that's the idea. So Gemini season is one of four mutable signs. We have Gemini, we have Virgo, we have Sagittarius, and we have Pisces. These four signs, if you were to trace them out in the wheel of the zodiac, you'd make a square. And these four signs help us to discover the world around us. Without Gemini, we wouldn't try anything. We wouldn't go anywhere. We wouldn't get curious. We would sort of just stick to the same small thing over and over again. And that's where Taurus can support. Taurus is like, all right, we're good, we're solid, we're grounded. Now we're going to try something new. So we build throughout our time together, our time walking the zodiac. And from Gemini, all of these choices and options bring us to Virgo, the other mutable sign. And through Virgo, we need to have discernment. We need to analyze. We need to edit. So all these different choices that we've been experiencing through Gemini season, and perhaps even with Jupiter in Gemini over the last 12 months, it is to now pare things down. Like, what works? What doesn't work? Where do I put all this stuff? But then we get to Sagittarius, ruled by Jupiter, not Mercury, and Sagittarius helps us to gain a bigger perspective. Sagittarius helps us to look outside of ourselves. It's no longer in the immediate environment. Virgo and Gemini, it's now outside of us. It's the world. We want to travel. We want to get on a spaceship. We want to get on a plane. We want to make our world bigger, and that could just be our own personal world. And we ask ourselves big questions. We want to learn. We get a degree perhaps, or we get the degree of life because we've tried everything, we've done everything. But that brings us to the last sign, the mutable sign, which is also happens to be the last sign of the zodiac, Pisces. And Pisces, where there has been a lot of things going on in Pisces the past couple of years, but Pisces says, what does this all make? For what purpose? For what meaning? It's not Pisces season. Saturn's not in Pisces right now, although it will go back on September 1st. But it's important for us to remember, especially as we are now in Gemini season, the twins, the first mutable sign, with that sort of question from Pisces, for what purpose, to what end? And so as we try things, we get curious, we choose different things, we get restless during Gemini season. It's always to remember the finality of the zodiac, which is Pisces. And Pisces always shows us the finality of our choices. And Pisces, like Gemini, has that duality. Pisces is the two fishes. Two fishes, twins, you sort of see this duality over and over again in the zodiac because we live in a world of duality, night and day, yes and no. So I just wanted to share that, apart from the fact about twins, which is, again, hysterical. Also, my mom's older sisters, they're no longer alive anymore, were twins, two different people, born within, I think, 5 minutes, but just made very different choices in life. Also Geminis, they would have been born, it would have been 80 something on June 13th. So anyway, a little bit of digression, but it's important. It's a philosophical point, and I'm not here to fight the fight around astrology. It's just to be able to have a language that helps us to understand the world around us and to help us to lift our eyes, so to speak, towards something greater questions, greater purpose and meaning, to fill our life with something, not just choices. I'm not taking a dig at Gemini, but sometimes Gemini is like, the candy. It's like, oh, this is nice, this is fun. But through the zodiac, through our path through the zodiac, we start to open up our eyes to, wait, maybe that's better. So again, we had a new moon. That new moon was a week ago, so it puts us into a new stage and setting. This will play out into the end of June. Now, if you watched my Astrology of 2025 webinar, I talked about how 2025, I think I did at least, is kind of like 3 parts. That first part, which we've come out of, that first part, We had Mars retrograde during that time. We had Mars opposite Pluto during that time. We had Venus retrograde. So it was a sense of needing to go back to things, but also with the opposition to Pluto and Mars, to even if that change was internal, to start to clear space, clear real estate. As you probably know, Saturn, so I've been talking about this past few weeks, Saturn is now in Aries. And so we are in a different period of time because Saturn is the master timekeeper. So now the clock points towards Aries. End of May, I realize that we're done with May, goodbye May, June, July, and August. This is a period where we gain new perspective on bigger stories and parts of our life that will take precedent in 2026. Wherever Saturn is, there's a lot of ways in which we can describe Saturn, but wherever Saturn is, that area of your life is a priority. I don't make the astrology. This is just for you to understand that now Saturn is pointing towards Aries. Wherever the Aries part of your astrology is a priority. Past 2 years, wherever Pisces is in your astrology, that area was a priority. So you could be Sagittarius or Sag rising. So home and family, past 2 years, Saturn and Pisces was a priority. But because we are the 50% and we have our own lived experiences, our own stories, our own family, our own complicated history with that word, we live that time and the priorities of that time through our personal lens. There you go. There's a duality. So the energy now has moved. And so it's interesting that last week and this week, we don't have a lot of big aspects. It's mostly the moon that's pushing along the narrative. Now, of course, I was just talking about Saturn, but that's sort of setting us up for something. Saturn is saying, pay attention to June, July, and August. And another reason, not because of Saturn, but the other reason to pay attention to June, hey, it's June, is because June is the midpoint of the eclipses. We are coming up to 3 months after a solar eclipse, and even the lunar eclipse on March 14th, and also 3 months before the eclipses to come in September. Over and over again, I've seen it where events, it really depends on your astrology, but events can happen that are very critical, not to sound dramatic, but really put a crossroads at this point. So June is a month for us to just observe. It's not to necessarily expect anything, but it's a time where the eclipse energy that was seeded 3 months ago can start to perhaps come into fruition. Maybe you're like 3 months ago, I need to move, and now you're ready for the move. Or you're thinking about something else, and now it's time for it to happen. Or you're getting a sense of something on the horizon, September, and you're doing the planning, or something else comes into your life. So I want us all to pay attention to June. This week in particular, Mercury rules Gemini season. Mercury rules the South Node in Virgo. And that Mercury, it is squaring the lunar nodes this week. It will make the exact square on June 5th. Anytime a planet either conjuncts the nodes or squares the nodes, there is sometimes pivotal choices that need to be made. Sometimes a story comes into view. Sometimes a door opens or closes. Second week of June, we start to ramp up the energy we will get next week. We'll talk more about this next week. Jupiter will go into Cancer, so that's another planet that's changing signs. Not the day-to-day stuff. That's Mercury, Venus, and Mars. But Jupiter changes signs once a year. Saturn changes signs every 2 to 3 years. And then in July 7th, I'm jumping ahead for a moment, Uranus will change signs. It will go into Gemini on July 7th. But to go back to the second week of June, we're starting to ramp up to something. And then, Jupiter is like a hand on the clock changing time. And then we get to the Sagittarius full moon. I think that's on the 13th. And then we get into the third week of June, and that's one to really watch because we have the final Jupiter square Saturn on the 15th. We have Mars square Uranus on the 15th. We also have Jupiter square Neptune on, I think it's the 17th. And that's just a lot of intense energy that's really focused in that third week of June. Don't worry, you don't need to hide under the covers. It's just information. But it could mean that there is a story that's starting to come more into focus that really puts us into the June, July, and August chapter of 2025. The other chapter of 2025, we go into the end of August. We've got 2 eclipses in September. Saturn goes back into Pisces, so we'll talk about that later. But I'm really interested in the June, July, and August period because Saturn has made its first arrival into Aries and hasn't been in Aries since 96, 97, 98 in the first couple of months of 1999. So this is our first foray into Saturn and Aries in a very long time, and our first foray into Saturn going into the beginning of the zodiac. It's a new cycle. Saturn's meeting up with Neptune. That's still something to really feel out. But June being a pivotal month, and especially for those that are Geminis, Sagittarius, Virgos, and Pisces, maybe things are starting to shift in some way. We will see. We also, for this week in particular, talked about Mercury squaring the lunar node. So we've got a little bit of a ripple of eclipse energy. And then we get into later this week, Mercury on the 8th, it will go into Cancer. So Cancer will then receive the energy of eclipse, or not eclipse, it will receive the energy of Gemini season. And Mercury in Cancer is a very different energy than Mercury in Gemini. Mercury in Gemini is like, let's go, let's do, let's try. It's very breezy, it's very light. Mercury in Cancer is more through an emotional lens. I want to feel something. It's not just to choose something, it's also to connect to my intuition and to feel like something really connects me to someone or something. So we're going to see a little vibe shift when Mercury goes into Cancer at the end of this week on the 8th. It's not the only other planet that's changing signs. Venus, finally, I say finally because if you may recall, Venus has been in and out of Aries since February 4th. And February feels like a different country at this point. But Venus, Venus is one of the personal planets. Personal planets are Mercury, Venus, and Mars. And when the personal planets are going a little bit slower than usual, or they're really not stuck is not the right word, but they're sort of spending a lot of time in one area of the zodiac, things are taking, let's say, a little bit longer to resolve. Perhaps with Venus getting into the end of Aries this week, it goes into Taurus on June 4th, we may see resolution with something that has been taking its time. Venus is what we love, it's what we value, it's what we spend time and money on. We live in a physical reality. We need to make sure we keep the lights on, we pay the bills, we have a sense of value and worth and a sense of resources. So Venus governs that as well. But Venus is also pleasure, the pleasure of enjoying our physical world. Venus is also fertility. It really wants to take the initiative and drive and energy of Aries and put it into something to make it real, stable, lived in concrete. So we've had this longer story that takes us back a few months where Venus, with the retrograde and back and forth in Aries and even Pisces, it's sort of like, what's a value? Maybe you wanted to put your time and energy and perhaps even your money on something different at the beginning of the year. But now with the Venus retrograde cycle completed, maybe we have a different point of view. Venus and Taurus, I love Venus and Taurus. It'll be for a few weeks, actually for 4 weeks, so pretty much through the end of June. It just says enjoy life. Take it more slowly. Put time and energy in the things that are truly of matter and of importance. Plus, they'll have the energy, although briefly, with Mercury in Cancer. And so Taurus and Cancer are a little bit more focused on home and family and taking it easy and enjoying life. So those are the big aspects this week. And like I said, it all sort of is in the run up to Jupiter going into Cancer. Jupiter gets out of Gemini, where it's been since May of 2024. It'll be in Cancer until June of 2026. Jupiter in classical astrology is exalted in Cancer. It says Jupiter does some of its best work in the sign of home and family and roots and foundation. I'm not the astrologer that's going to overpromise Jupiter, but it sounds pretty nice. We will have to see, but Jupiter will be in Cancer again for a year, and then we are all sort of maybe starting to feel a little bit of things ramping up in intensity as we get into that third week of June. So we'll talk more about that next week. So having said that, let's look at each of the 12 zodiac signs and just sort of map out some of the priorities and put these eclipses back on your radar. I know you're like, but Katie, the eclipses were 3 months ago. Can we just move on? That's the thing about astrology. It's time. We have the lunar cycle as the smaller measurement of time. It's not the month as we know it in our calendar. It's the lunar month. And then we have Saturn being the larger measure of time. And the eclipses, because they connect to the new and full moon and the lunar nodes, they fit within the frame that Saturn makes with time. So let's look at each of the 12 zodiac signs, starting with Aries. So Aries, your planet is still in Leo. I know it's been a long time, but it's just been this extra long time. And I say since beginning of November, that's a long time for you to really get into these themes about self and self-expression and creativity, getting back to yourself, trying to restart your desires, your wants, your needs, particularly if you're burnt out, for example. And you had those pretty intense Mars-Pluto oppositions that took you through December, January, and even into April. Just to put it on your radar, Mars will change signs. I think it's on the 17th that it goes into Virgo, and that will give you some new territory to start to focus on. That said, Gemini season is typically a season for you to move, to travel, to try new things, to go on trips, to focus on your education, the sort of these larger questions about choice, the choices that you're making, choices about your future, how you're communicating, how you're thinking, and even how you're learning. The energy of the season will start to point towards home and family. This is all in advance of the sun going into Cancer on around the 20th or 21st of June. Saturn, as you know, is now in Aries, so you are the priority. That's one way of looking at it. Saturn is sort of saying, like, it's all on you, starting this new cycle in your life. So this is just a good checkpoint. Like, how are you feeling, Aries? Like, what's different? You're like, nothing's different, Katie. Or how do you feel that maybe life is starting to ask a little bit more of you, or there are opportunities to step up into new roles of duties and responsibilities, for example? We have that. We have the Gemini new moon. It continues to point towards travel, exploration. This is in advance of the Sagittarius full moon next week that will put the focus on faith and truth and meaning. But what I wanted to go back to before I forget is, you had eclipses in Pisces back in September of last year, but in Virgo back in March of this year. You'll have eclipses, Virgo, Pisces, in September of this year. And those two signs are signs of health and wellness. They're signs that tell you to sort of focus on your physical health and wellness, or put things in order. Or maybe it's a little bit more philosophical. It's like, how do you want to organize your day? Where do you want to put your energy? But having eclipses here, these eclipses will take you into even the beginning of 2027. See how those themes, even though those eclipses were 3 months before and 3 months in front of you, are starting to come into focus this year. That's not this year, this month, but that's to put you at least, sort of in the observation of where some of the shift points are for you in 2025. Taurus, Venus is your planet, and Venus is finally getting the whatever out of Aries, where it's been off and on since beginning of February. Because you're ruled by Venus, wherever Venus is, it pulls the energy of your sign over towards that part of the sky. And so for you, Aries represents your 12th. It's been a time to go within, to rest, to recuperate, to reflect, to focus on your spirituality, to let things go in preparation of a new cycle. Venus going into Taurus gives you a sense of renewal and new beginnings. It brings the energy of your ruling planet to your sign. It gives strength to your ruling sign and your sun or your rising sign if you're Taurus rising. So on some level, this is a new chapter, a new phase for you. And this can go back even to some of the seeds that were planted probably about 5 weeks ago with the Taurus new moon. I just can't remember what date that was. And so, how were any of the seeds that were planted at the beginning of April, do you start to see things start to come to the forefront? That said, it's Gemini season. Gemini is a season that really puts the focus on money and income and material stability and security. This is all in advance of a Sagittarius full moon next week. You may have some sort of decision to make around an asset, a mortgage, money that you're spending, money in the bank, something that really creates wealth or security, or even looking at debt. It is, Saturn is now in Aries. To go back to that 12th for you, Taurus, start to pay attention to where the deeper spiritual questions and leanings are starting to come up into your life right now, because Saturn getting into Aries is initiating you into a deeper time of spirituality or letting go, clearing spaces that prepares you for a much bigger cycle to come at the end of this decade. The eclipses that we had 3 months ago, they were in your signs of community and friends, also signs that talk about who you are, your talents, your gifts, your abilities, identity, and self. And I also wanted to add that because we are at the midpoint of the eclipses, so see if any of those themes around community and a sense of belonging and who you are is starting to come into your experiences this month in June. Gemini. Happy birthday, Gemini. No, I'm not. Yeah, happy birthday, Gemini. Sorry, I was like, wait, is it Cancer season? Nope, it's not Cancer season yet. So happy birthday, Gemini. You had that Gemini new moon a week ago, so we are in a season where now we are in this stage that is through the lens of Gemini. Gemini, you're a sign that teaches us to enjoy life in all of its different flavors and colors, to try new things, to travel, to get curious, but to use our voice and to learn. Gemini, you will have a full moon in Sagittarius, your relationship sign. This is going to happen next week, and I sort of want to put that on your horizon. Another thing to put on your horizon is that your planet that rules your career, Jupiter, and relationships is going to go into Cancer next week. And so it's going to shift the energy towards a sign, because you've had Jupiter in your sign for the last year, that is more focused on security, stability, settling down, value and worth. And maybe there's just been this whole story of the last year where it's been like trying a lot of new things. And I think Jupiter in Cancer is more focused in like what's going to be a good value, what's going to be a good investment. It's a big time to be a Gemini. That's not just because Jupiter has been in your sign for a year, although it's beginning to leave, and also for other reasons that we'll continue to talk about for the next couple of weeks. But you've had eclipses in your career sign in September, and also your sign of home and family just this past March, career, family, roots, foundation, the role that you play in the world, your relationship with responsibility, your public life. These are areas that are really prominent in your astrology this year. And I wanted to sort of make that macro point because June is really a hinge point for those eclipses that we had 3 months ago and the eclipses that we will have September 7th and September 21st. Maybe you, even though it's not the season for this, maybe you will see something around your home environment or around your professional life and your career in June. Some Geminis are thinking about moving. Some Geminis have moved. Maybe it's getting into bigger question about where is home and who is home. And again, with Jupiter changing signs, the narrative is going to shift. The priorities are going to change. Don't forget that Saturn is now in Aries. So your focus, your priority, although it will go back to your career on September 1st, is to focus on the future. Saturn is trying to get you to get very serious about where you're going, where you're headed, and how you want to build for that future. Saturn is also getting very, wanting you to get very focused on your social life, your sense of community and belonging. And Saturn is not into fair weather friends, so just pay attention to where you see some tension points with friendships. It's just to really make friendships solid and to have really strong connections at this time. Cancer, so the moon is your planet, and the moon is going anywhere from Virgo all the way to Scorpio later this week. For you with the moon and Virgo, it puts you in a focus towards education and ideas and information and needing to try new things, but also needing to analyze and to sort. And then this is going to take you all the way to Scorpio by the end of the week. Later this week in Libra, it's a time to focus on home and family. And then towards you, it's time to get back to the things you love, the things you enjoy, yourself, your self-expression, your creativity. That said, it's Gemini season, and Gemini is the end of your personal astrology. So it represents the cycle that you have completed, the year that you have completed, depending on whether it's a sun in Gemini, it's a sun in Cancer, or a Cancer rising chart. And now you're preparing for something new. Your time in Gemini season ideally is to release the past, to integrate your experiences, to sort of figure out what worked, what didn't work, to sort of get that higher viewpoint, to rest, to prepare, and to connect with your intuition. Jupiter has been in this space for the last year. It's meant to enrich faith or the search for deeper meaning and purpose, the need to go within, the need to nourish your spirit and your soul. But it also on some level has represented the end of a personal cycle. So when Jupiter goes into Cancer, hey, you're Cancer rising on June 9th, next Monday, it's the start of a grand new cycle. Jupiter to Cancer is giving you the confidence and inspiring you to set sail on some sort of new adventure, some sort of great cycle, because Jupiter will take another 11 and a half years to come back to Cancer. So it's a new cycle. That said, we do have this, sorry, I just was thinking of something else. So we now have Saturn in Aries, and Aries is your career sign. And I just wanted to add, and I said this in the introduction before I did the sign by sign look, is that wherever Saturn is, that area of your life is a priority. And Saturn is really starting to get you to look at your career June, July, and August. And it's saying, and it really depends on who you are. It's time for you to figure out what you want to be when you grow up. Either it is you're going all in what you're doing right now, or you're really taking some serious steps to go in a different direction. It's a time of building, but it's also a time of accountability. You can't have any messes. More responsibility is being asked of you. I know, sounds like fun. But that with this new cycle, you do have this sort of the tension point that's really throughout June, where on one hand, you want to go off in some new direction, But Saturn is also trying to get you to be very focused, very practical, and very grounded about it. June is a microcosm for bigger points that we see throughout the year. These eclipses that we had 3 months ago, the eclipses that we will have in September, they have been along spaces in your astrology that are more philosophical in focus, more education, more travel, more philosophical. Like, what do you believe in? What do you stand for? What do you think is true? A need to get a degree, a need to state your convictions, a need to find a sense of compass within your life, a need to explore, a need to get curious, a need to focus on your education. Look to see how some of these bigger points, especially the last couple of years, a lot of the work that you've been doing around faith, truth, meaning, higher education, and travel really comes to some sort of crossroads in June. It's not to necessarily expect anything, but it's just to observe what are the bigger stories that are coming into a focal point, and maybe with this week needing to make some decisions. Leo, the sun is your planet. So right now the sun is in Gemini, and Gemini is starting to coming to the end of your personal astrology. Gemini is something called your 11th sign. It brings you towards the end. It says it's time to look outward towards the future, your hopes, your dreams. It's also to feel a sense of greater connection, your friends, your community, to spend more time with friends and community, for example. So this stage and setting for the next 4 weeks are really around, and for some of you, it's also around social issues, social causes, and these sort of bigger themes that unite us and sometimes even divide us as human beings. Leo, for you, now that Saturn is in Aries, the priority for the next 3 months and even the next few years is something called your 9th. What do you believe in? What do you stand for? What is your faith, your truth, your meaning, your convictions? For some Leos, it's more about getting a degree, going back to school. For some Leos, it's about travel and exploration. For some Leos, it's about stepping into a role of teacher or way shower. But it will get into these sort of bigger philosophical themes, especially within June and July and August. June is a microcosm for bigger themes that we were seeing throughout 2025. And that microcosm is really along the lines for you, Leo, around something called the 2nd and 8th. You've been going through a money transit. It's either money or it's something, money in the sense of not literal money, but more like the philosophical side of money, like what's truly of value and importance to you. With these eclipses, maybe there has been a lot of things around money and spending, or having enough or not having enough, or needing to really figure out, well, what do I really need? And for some Leos, it's neither. It's more emotional, and really needing to feel like this past couple of years in particular, you've had to look at yourself. You've needed to go into very deep spaces to do the inner work that supports your time of faith and truth and meaning, and needing to really find your convictions now that Saturn is in Aries. So look to June to be either a focal point for money and income, resources, assets, debt, or even intimacy, trust, power, control, transformation, and getting into the deeper spaces that help you to really reveal what do you believe in, what do you stand for, and what do you think is true. Virgo, so Mercury is your planet, and Mercury is by the 8th, so someday it's leaving Gemini, where it's been for the past couple of weeks, and it's going to go into Cancer. So for you, Virgo, Gemini is your career sign. It's just been a very quick clip while it's been in Gemini, but don't forget we had a Gemini new moon just last week. So your career, your duties and responsibilities in the world, your public life, are where a lot of the things are happening over the next 3-4 weeks. with Mercury moving on, it pulls the energy of you towards the 11th. The 11th is your friends, your community, your sense of belonging, your networking, your social issues, social causes. And it's a time where you're taking the energy of your professional life or your public life and you're putting it towards your community in some way. That said, if we go back to Gemini, now Jupiter is about to leave Gemini. So I wanted to sort of focus very quickly on your professional life because it's to take stock of it. Like, what sort of new opportunities have come your way over the last year? How has your professional life grown or your public life grown? Because Jupiter has been in this space where typically you want more. You want to grow your career, or you want more ambition, or you want something different, or you just want to go out into the world. But Jupiter will move that energy towards friends and communities starting next week. We also, it's a very interesting time to be a Virgo because Virgo is where we're having eclipses. In fact, we are 3 months before, approximately, there's going to be a Virgo new moon solar eclipse on September 21st, so at the very end of Virgo, actually. And if you remember, we will have a Pisces full moon lunar eclipse on September 7th. And so we had a Virgo eclipse back on March 14th. And June is taking the energy of the eclipses and putting it into this month. So June is kind of a microcosm for the year. It's a focal point for the astrology already that's really putting a lot of attention on you and new beginnings and needing to step up into something, but also a part of your chart that talks about relationships. Relationships come in all different forms. You have the Virgos that are getting into serious relationships or even ending serious relationships. You have the Virgos that are realizing that they need to perhaps not do everything on their own or try to do everything and maybe to delegate. Or maybe it's just a general look at this time of the importance of people and relationships in your life. But it's to see how relationships or you or new beginnings or more dynamic new beginnings that are really coming into focus in June. Libra. So Venus is your planet, and Venus is finally getting out of Aries. It has been in Aries pretty much back and forth since February 4th. And Aries for you is your relationship sign. So it's like that area has been an area where your energy has been pulled, and relationships come in a lot of different forms, but maybe that has been a primary relationship, a marriage, a partnership. Maybe it's just been more of a social time for you. But Venus, in a way, was, I think, planting crumbs, so to speak. I don't know, maybe there's a planting seeds for now that Saturn is there. Because Saturn, June and July and August will be in Aries. And so Saturn is saying to Libra rising, relationships are your priority. Maybe an existing relationship now needs more focus and attention, or an existing relationship wants to go into a different phase or chapter, whether it's two people moving in together, getting married, getting pregnant, ending the relationship, or something else. That is at least for 2025, and then 6 and 7 is going to be your focal point. But Venus is going on the 4th, is going to go into Taurus, and Taurus is something called your 8th sign. Now, Venus is going to be in Taurus for just 4 weeks, but the 8th is a space where you get into deeper themes about intimacy, trust, power, and control. Now, if relationships are at the focal point, especially for June and July and August, it is also to look at the other side of relationships. What goes on between two people? What secrets, what intimacy, what happens behind closed doors, what happens in the bedroom, for example. These could be themes in which Venus has to navigate. What do we owe people? How do we navigate the deeper complexities of relationships, for example? That said, June is a focal point and a microcosm for some of the larger themes of the astrology of this year. And you have to remember that in 2025 and even 6, there are eclipses that are going back and forth between your 6, which is health and wellness, your day-to-day life, but also your 12th, which is spirituality. It is also the bridge between heaven and earth. It is the need to let things go. It could be the end of one phase and chapter of your life that might be bringing up a lot of different emotions depending on the person and the circumstances. But I wanted to remind you where the eclipses are because that eclipse energy can manifest in June. And so this week you may have some decisions to make. You might have something that you need to clean up, or you may even have something that you need to let go. Scorpio. So Mars is your planet, and it's been a long time in Leo, and it's just taken your energy and it takes it and focuses on your career. It could be career, it could be your public life, it could be an increased sense of duty and responsibility in your life to continue to step into greater and greater roles, and sometimes even public roles of responsibility. And then we'll talk about this more in the next couple of weeks, but Mars will finally leave Leo, where it's been since the beginning of November, and it's going to go into Virgo on the 17th of June. So it's going to be new terrain, a breath of fresh air, but also in the next couple of weeks, maybe you are seeing some sort of conclusion points around this bigger work on career and public life and responsibility. Gemini season for you sounds an awful lot like being a Scorpio because Gemini is your 8th sign. The season for you to look within, to question yourself, to feel vulnerable, to get in sometimes even the more uncomfortable parts of yourself. Sounds like fun, but it's through this work that Scorpio needs to learn the power of choice. Do I burn it all down, or do I take positive creative steps to perhaps go in a different direction? With the full moon that's going to be next week, this could be a time that's about money, income, material stability and security, assets, finances, inheritances, wealth, trusts. It really depends on the person. But that said, Saturn, as you know, a couple weeks ago, it's now in Aries, and so the energy is now prioritizing something called your 6. I don't know how you're feeling over the past couple of weeks, Scorpio, but the 6 is like you can't get more real world than the 6. It is your day-to-day life. It is your schedule. It is brushing your teeth, taking your vitamins, eating your vegetables. It is your work, your projects, your sense of health and wellness, if I didn't say that already. And so Saturn is saying this area is your priority. It's your priority June, July, and August, and absolutely 100% your priority 2026 and into the beginning of 2020, throughout 2027 as well. So take note because you're in a new time, Scorpio. That said, we are having, we're in this point where June is a microcosm for larger themes of 2025. And in 2025 and even 2026, you have eclipses in Virgo and Pisces. And so Virgo is your sign of friends and community, your sense of connection and belonging, and Pisces on some level represents you, but how you express yourself, your passion, your talents, your gifts, and your abilities. And there might be something about friends and community. There might be something about you and how you express who you are that's really coming to some sort of crossroads or focal point in June. And that might push you into that 8th house where things are uncomfortable, but perhaps ultimately necessary so that something can shift. Sagittarius. So we got 1 week until your planet Jupiter changes signs. So you have to understand you run on an 11.5-year cycle compared to, let's say, Gemini, which can be anywhere from 2 weeks to 2 months, depending on where Mercury and what Mercury is doing. So that's a big difference. So every year, Jupiter changes signs. Last year it went to Gemini. Gemini is your relationship sign. So it sort of says the energy of you has been pointed towards relationships the past 12 months, give or take. Starting next week, the energy is going to move towards your 8th. Now, here's a little bit of the irony, because on one hand, Jupiter loves Cancer. Jupiter says it does its best work in the sign that's about home and family, roots, foundation, past and memory, mom, connection, those sort of things, ancestors. Jupiter is going to go into your 8th for a year. And so this is the part that's a little bit of the irony, is that the 8th is a space that's designed for us to face ourselves. I know you're like, I don't want this, Katie. I don't make the astrology. But for the next 12 months, it's a period to really look within, to get into these deeper themes about family and home and the past and ancestors and legacies. But perhaps even to have that sort of Jupiterian confidence or overconfidence to go into these sometimes even uncomfortable parts within ourselves. The beauty of the 8th is that's where we grow. Sagittarius is so famous for wisdom and knowledge, and my joke is, how do you get wisdom and knowledge? You have to go through Scorpio, the sign before. You have to go through 8th to get to the 9th, wisdom and knowledge. So all this internal look at the next next coming months is to prepare you for 2026 to 7 when Jupiter goes into Leo. And that's a time of that double fire energy about the world, about travel, about exploration. That said, it is Gemini season. Relationships, both relationships, capital R, our primary relationships, partners, our parents. I realize parents are not technically this part in astrology, but that's a lot of where relationship energy can come from. But Gemini season, and will also prepare you for next week's Sagittarius full moon that will put you in the spotlight on or around the 13th of June. But it is an interesting time to be a Sagittarius, because you have eclipses in something called your sign of home and family, which is Pisces, and also Virgo, which is your career sign, throughout 2025 and even 2026. So even though we are 3 months past the eclipses and now 3 months ahead of the eclipses in September, that will be in Virgo Pisces, you may see something about family or something about your career that's really focusing on in June. So June's kind of a critical month for you. And it's a time when things might be coming to the forefront, coming to a head. But do keep in mind, Sagittarius, that it's also a change of hour for you with Jupiter going into Cancer. So Cancer is more emotional. It's not rational and analytical a mind like Gemini. So there might start to get more emotional and feeling. I know you're like, I don't want that. Sorry. As you get into the rest of June and even beyond. And with that said, like, where is home? Who is home? Where do you put down roots? Where do you call home? What role do you want to play in the world? What title do you want after your name? It's just a big time to be a Sagittarius, but I believe in you, Sag, because you're always the sign that can help find that higher path and the bigger vision to pull you through. Capricorn, so Saturn is your planet. So how are we feeling, Capricorn, now that Saturn is in Aries? Aries is a very different sign and even a different element and even a different part of the zodiac than Pisces. We went from the end, Pisces, water, to fire. New beginnings, family, home, putting down roots. For some Capricorns, you are in a period of your life of settling down. That doesn't have to be a traditional statement, but a time to come into yourself, to start to ask yourself, where is home and who is home? And sometimes where is home is to make a major move, or to buy a home, or to set up a home with a new partner, for example, or to even focus on family as a larger, broader concept. And in reality, home is always to find it within. Saturn and Aries also initiates you and inspires you in this new time. Again, what are you sensing? What are you feeling? Saturn is in Aries, June, July, and August. So that's a real focal point for you, Capricorn, to see what themes are coming into your life, because it's really marking this new time in your life. Now, Gemini season for you, Capricorn, is a time for you to focus either on health and wellness, for you to put things in order and structure, for you to be able to try a lot of new things, but at the same time have a sense of organization. But we are a week away from that Sagittarius full moon, and that puts the spotlight on something called your 12th. And the 12th is more spiritual than your day-to-day life. So maybe you're feeling a sense of big emotions coming up. Maybe you're sensing something that wants to leave, or at least prepare, like something has to leave 12 so that you can really go into this new time, Saturn and Aries, in your life. June is a critical month, perhaps not as much for you as the other signs. I would say July is more critical for you, especially as we get into Cancer season, because we pick up on that Aries eclipse energy from the end of March. But June is critical because it brings the energy of the eclipses to the forefront, particularly the eclipses for September. And these eclipses are more about education, information, learning, ideas, travel, curiosity, exploration. And for some Capricorn, that's about questions or even matters of faith. What do I believe in? What do I stand for? And that energy might really be a strong focus and lens to your experiences, even for June, even though those eclipses are 3 months away. So really embrace these deeper existential questions that are coming up, because they are helping you to step into this new phase and chapter of your life. Aquarius, so Saturn is your planet. How are you feeling with Saturn now in Aries? Now, Aries is a very different element, sign, and even place in the zodiac compared to where it was in Pisces. We had 2 years, you heard me say it almost every week, of really focusing on either your material life, investments, resources, a sense of value and worth, to Saturn's now in the third. And so your third sign is saying June and July and August are really a time to travel, explore, to try new things, to get curious, to focus on your education, to focus on your mind. But also Saturn is saying to Aquarius to get serious about the choices that you're making. You have a lot of options perhaps coming to you, but which ones do you choose? Saturn to Aries. Aries brings you into the energy of initiation, new beginnings, fire, motivation, power. So how are you feeling? Like, I don't feel it. But feel into it, even if you're not feeling it per se, because it really will color June and July and August for you. We are in Gemini season, and Gemini is a fellow air sign. It's a season for you to really focus on the things that light you up, give you joy, give you passion, give you pleasure. Perhaps you are traveling and enjoying life, or maybe it's more about getting back to the things that actually fulfill you, for example. We will have a full moon next week. That full moon will be in your, what's called your 11th. It's about community, your friends, your social network, but also your sense of belonging within the greater whole of the world. June's an important month because it really acts as a microcosm for larger themes that are present throughout 2025. And these themes are going to sound very familiar to a domain that you have just left. Money, income, material stability, and security. For some Aquariuses, it's about property and assets, buying property, getting a sense of value and worth. Maybe it's about setting up finances, planning for the future, getting into more themes about debt and spending. It's for you to see how this is relevant. But that might be a focal point in June, and maybe you're, with the fact that June is Gemini season, it's about you, it's about the things that give you passion. Maybe it's to kind of return to the things that are truly of value to you, and to invest and to spend time in your life with the things that actually nourish you. Pisces, so Jupiter is your planet, and Jupiter is 1 week away from changing signs. So about this time of year, although it slowly creeps differently each year, Jupiter changes signs and it pulls the energy of you to a new sign. You could say it's a sign for you it's like trying on new clothes for a year, or you could say it's like stepping into a new space of your life. And over the past year for Pisces, a lot of the energy has been on home and family, roots and foundation. This has been in conjunction with the fact that Saturn was in Pisces, which is you or your rising sign. So it's possible that the past year has asked a lot of you increased responsibilities. Maybe there's been a move. Maybe it's been sort of really marking major points and chapters of these milestones in your life of last year and even the last 2 years. With Jupiter moving into Cancer, it goes into a fellow water sign. So you're Pisces, Pisces rising, Pisces is water, Jupiter is also water. So there's a sense of an element that you thrive on: emotions, connections, feeling safe, feeling secure, feeling held, your intuition, your dreams, feeling like your life has at least trying to fulfill your life with a sense of meaning and purpose. Jupiter loves to be in Cancer, so the next year it could put the focus in continuation with family, with home, but also a period of your life that is about you getting back to you focusing on your creativity, your self-expression, your passions, your joys. And for some Pisces, and I realize this is a much smaller subset, especially with those eclipses in Pisces and even Saturn going back into Pisces just from September to February, it could be pregnancy, or it could be a focus on children. Again, that's not going to be relevant for everybody. But June is a major month, and it is a big time to be a Pisces because you will have a Pisces lunar eclipse on September 7th. I know that's 3 months away, but 3 months before the eclipses is sometimes when we see the eclipse. And for you, that eclipse is both you, but it's also relationships. And to see how June is a focal point for this energy of relationships and new beginnings in your life, and also changes in your home. So again, that sort of talks about this. I realize this is not going to be exact for every person, but it is a period of settling down in your life. And sit with that word or that phrase, settling down. What does that mean for you? And if settling down means to settle down yourself, to make sure that you are getting your needs prioritized or you are getting fulfilled, then great. If settling down for you means starting a family, then great. If it means something else, fantastic. But this is a period where it's more about your inner world, your inner life, your immediate environment, than necessarily the world outside of you. I will say before I forget, Saturn is now in Aries, and Aries is your 12th. And wherever Saturn is, that area is a priority. So let's not forget for June, July, and August, and then in 2026 and 7, that your spirituality might be one of the areas that is a priority, but also the 12th represents a need to let go and to prepare for a new chapter and a new cycle in your life. So there you go. That is your look at the astrology of June, 2nd through 8th, 2025. I had to think about it for a second. So yeah, how are you all feeling? Saturn in Aries, it's just, you're like, I don't feel anything, or I feel everything. Just, let me know. And how this new area of focus and priority is showing up in your life. You can still get my big overview webinar as well as a sign-by-sign look. It's like this, but smarter and more focused. And you can get the webinar. It's on my website, empoweringastrology.com. You can also follow me on Facebook, on Instagram. I'm on Spotify, I'm on YouTube, and you can book a consultation with me so we can see how these new beginnings are showing up in your life. So there you go. That is your look at the astrology this week. I will see you all next week. And until then, take care. Bye-bye.